Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. These pots have spent the winter undercover. I put them in the bus shelter in the Paradise Garden, and that is to protect them from rain, not cold. Increasingly, I'm growing tulips in pots rather than in borders, particularly with the way that the climate's changing and our weather is getting wetter and wetter, because tulips hate sitting in heavy, wet soil, particularly when it's cold. So by growing them in pots, I can give them the drainage that they need. But even then, if they sit outside all winter with the rain coming down, they're bound to get soaked. But now that the shoots are emerging and there's foliage, it means that they need sunlight. And so I can put them out where they're going to be, and then they can get maximum light. A bit of rain won't hurt them. And very soon, they should be flowering, and we'll get the sort of display that I love. And the bigger pots, which are much too big to lift and move, I've protected from the squirrels and the rats and the mice and the birds with rose pruning. So I need to remove those, because once these are out and the weather warms up a bit, these will grow fast. And by the middle of April, this should be gloriously alight with colour. And because it's the cottage garden, they'll all be pastel colours. Pinks and pale yellows and lilacs. But despite the softness of the colour, it sings out on a spring day. Now, coming up on today's programme, Nick visits a garden in Essex to discover how matrix planting can be used to best effect.
People think of this style of gardening as being very much kind of late summer and into autumn interest, but actually what you've created here is truly year-round.
Yes, maybe just by looking at it, it looks very complex, but actually when you think about the different layers, it's actually quite easy to understand.
We meet a grower in Dorset whose love of dahlias has grown and grown.
I bought my first dahlia, and it was a bright pink one, and I was very taken with it. The next year I had 7 dahlias, and then suddenly I had 300, and then it was, I think, 600 and then 1,000.
Frances heads to a community garden in Bradford, the 2025 UK City of Culture, which provides a welcome for all the community.
Oh, I love it here. It's absolutely lovely.
Yeah.
Everybody's so friendly.
Different cultures.
We learn about each other's cultures, like we had a pakora day here.
Yeah, that was amazing.
That was really nice, wasn't
And then
it?
we made apple crumble.
Apple crumble, yeah.
And I shall be doing some fairly dramatic remedial action on my new lawn. I suspect that most of you will recognize this, even when it's empty like this, as the jaw garden. And it's been the jaw garden for the last, 28 years. But of course, it hasn't always been the jaw garden. When we came here, there was no garden at all. This was an open field. There was a very bad tempered horse down the far end. It was brambly and tusky, and it took me a full year to clear it. And then I decided I would make a big circular lawn, and I planted a yew hedge all the way around. Funnily enough, I knew almost from day one that it wasn't going to work. I just had this feeling that I was doing the wrong thing. So I thought, OK, cut my losses, let's do something else. And we decided to be radically different. We would make a garden that celebrated our years doing jewellery in the 1980s. And we'd worked with rock stars and film stars and royalty, and it was glamorous and it was fun. And so we thought, OK, we'll make a garden where the plants are all jewel-like. And of course, that just means choosing your colours. So we had ruby and amethyst and sapphire. In fact, we had all the jewel colours. Now, the point of telling you that story is that when you're making a garden, when you're making a border or even a small bed, even a big pot, it needs to have some kind of theme or story that you can work with. It could be colour, it could be texture, it could be a type of plant, it could be grasses or alpines, it doesn't matter. Now, in this case, it's jewel colours. And it worked well. It looked great, but it was gradually losing its oomph. So last year, I thought, OK, let's redo it. Let's have a revamp. And we took everything that we could out, and then we thought, well, we'll start again. Still been true to the dual garden, but rebuild with a freshness. Now, you may notice there are an awful lot of green shoots here. Those come from allium purple sensation, and it's the weed of the dual garden. But as weeds go, it's a pretty good one to have. The next step is to bring back the herbaceous plants that we've lifted and stored over winter. But before I do that, we're going to join Nick on the other side of the country, a very different garden to Longmeadow, different soil, different climate, different approach. But it also uses a strong theme, and the result is magnificent.
When planning any garden, it's always worth spending some time thinking about how your beds and borders will look all year round, not just at the height of spring and summer. As the light fades, air cools and plants die back, this is when structure and form take centre stage to retain a sense of drama. And this garden manages to squeeze every drop of life and excitement from the soil before the season starts to change and we turn our attention to winter. It was designed by Stefano Marinaz, who brought his experience of working in Italy and the Netherlands here to Braintree in Essex. Now, Stefano, this garden is looking absolutely glorious today, especially with this autumn backlight. But actually, when you arrived here, it was a completely blank canvas, right?
Yes, indeed. When we came here in April time, 3 years ago, it was only 300 square meters of a bare lawn. But instead, we designed a garden where we create plant communities combining grasses, perennials, shrubs, and trees, as well as obviously the bulbs. So all these layers were all combined, and you see in this result.
But they don't, of course, all arrive at once. You've got successional planting that sort of comes and goes through the year, and then plants that will carry on all the way through the winter.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of this type of naturalistic planting, where you have different layers emerging as well as disappearing.
The garden sits beautifully within its own right, but it's against the backdrop of a very big black barn. And so how have you got that to work?
Well, as we couldn't compete with the volume of the house, we took inspiration, we look at the details, so sort of this timber cladding, and then we drew these lines of the Prunus lusitanica hedging, which is kept clipped, and it runs much more concentrated from the courtyard, comes out, and then it feathers out as you move away from the house.
So it's sort of taking the architecture into the landscape with plants.
Indeed.
I think a lot of people think of this style of gardening as being very much kind of late summer and into autumn interest, but actually what you've created here is truly year-round.
Yes, maybe just by looking at it, it looks very complex, but actually when you think about the different layers, so you have the perennials, you have the bulbs, you have the shrubs, you actually see each component, and it's actually quite easy to understand.
The garden envelops you with a rich sense of abundance the moment you walk through the gate. And this effect is achieved through the use of matrix planting. The essence of what a matrix planting is all about creating a community of plants that support each other. So to break that down a bit, the planting here, there's nearly 3,000 perennials planted in here, of which around about half are grasses. And grasses are absolutely key to a matrix planting. They provide the ground cover, they provide the support for the perennials which emerge up through them. And so looking through this area directly in front of me, there's repeated grasses, but coming up through them are a succession of different perennials and annuals. So, for example, in front of me here, this is Galenia trifoliata. It looks fabulous with white flowers in summer. It's taken on these gorgeous autumn notes now, and then the seed heads will last well into winter. Then looking further back into the garden, you've got fabulous spots of colour, even in autumn with the asters that repeat all the way through. And so with that clever combination of grasses as key structure and then emerging ephemeral plants, some self-seeders, some bulbs and some perennials, you set up a fabulous plant community that has a succession of colour and interest nearly year-round. Something that's absolutely vital to make matrix plantings work well is to have long flowering species which you repeat all the way through the planting. And there are great examples here. In fact, an old friend and a new friend. Down here, the old friend is Dahlia violacea. Now, it's a plant that comes from South Africa, and you can probably recognise it. It's an allium relative, sometimes called society garlic. But what's brilliant about it is it manages to flower from June all the way to November, non-stop. Beautiful thing. Now, the new friend back here is a plant known as mountain mint, and it comes from the US, but it's very closely related to our mints. In fact, it's in the Lamiaceae family. And the leaves are absolutely packed with this minty essential oil, which smells absolutely delicious. But here in a matrix setting, it's the perfect plant. It manages to hold itself up brilliantly. It flowers over an incredibly long season and is absolutely loved by pollinators. And then going into winter, as it drops its leaves, these seed heads take on lovely burnished tones, and they will last all the way through winter. And the garden is packed with plants that perform long after the flowers have faded. One of the things that gives this garden such great seasonality and longevity is the choice of perennials that have looked fabulous in summer, but produce amazing seed heads that will last all the way through winter until spring. Things like this phlomis just here, it's really good for bird food as well. This Asclepias down here with these wonderful conical heads. You've got this lemonium with this sort of sea foam quality which will roll all the way through winter. And then finally, this eryngium. It's in flower now, but it will slowly take on kind of burnished brown and beige tones, and it looks absolutely fabulous carrying hoarfrost. The repetition within the garden creates a rhythm as you move through the space. Even when species change, Stefano has carefully selected similar forms. I know that you've really sort of punctuated the space with a series of different multi-stemmed trees. Why do you use them in that way?
They provide a bit of privacy, they filter the lights, and they create a lovely double shade underneath which you can sit.
The species that you've selected, things like the Cercis siliquestrum or the Colretaria over here, are really plants that have great seasonality. They do many things, but they have fabulous autumn colour. How important was that in your choices?
Yeah, they have definitely strong colors, and they start the season with the flowering, and they continue into autumn with the strong autumn colors. But also in winter, when they're completely bare without the leaves and the seed pods, they still have these sort of sculptural qualities that are beautiful to have dotted within the garden.
Well, I have to say, it's been such a pleasure to spend time in this garden today. The matrix that you built has kind of set up this incredible ecology that sort of equally balances pollinators, people and plants. And I think as a whole, it's a fabulous garden that all of us and everything wants to be in.
Well, thank you, Nick, for that. We do look forward to see how the garden develops throughout the years.
I really do like the matrix approach, and I'm going to use that to a certain extent in the jaw garden, but in a different way, or at least with different plants. I'm going to start with these. This is a Rebecca laciniata herbstone. It's a really dramatic, strong vertical plant with wonderful bright yellow daisy flowers that will flower from July right through till October. Now, all these came from 2 or 3 clumps that had developed in the jaw garden. I lifted them, divided them, so we've got 40 plants, each of which will cost us about a tenner in a garden centre. So I'm going to lift these, and we can start replanting. And because they were only put in a few months ago, they come out very easily. Now you can see here that alliums are growing up in amongst the roots of the Rudbeckia. Now, I can live with an allium popping up, but if this were bindweed or ground elder or couch grass, it would be crazy to replant this and say, oh, it's only a little bit. What you need to do in that case is to wash the roots, wash all the soil off, and then you can see the alien roots because they will look different. I'm placing these in groups of 3, and generally, odd numbers always looks more natural. I know that on my soil, in this garden, these Rudbeckias will grow 2 meters tall. And it is important when you're constructing a border or a garden to really take into account the soil, the aspect, the exposure to wind. Nothing stunts growth more than a cold wind. The better you know your garden, the more likely it is to succeed. So, for example, what plants do well in your ground? Don't try and waste time and energy growing things that don't want to be there. Now, I like to place everything before I plant anything. But if you've lifted them from the garden and are transplanting them, on a day like today, which is quite dry, the roots will dry up. So I need to get them in the ground. And I'll give them a good soak when I've planted everything. Now, if I plant it here in the front, it blocks the view through. As a rule, it's a good idea to put your taller plants nearer the middle or the back of a border, but not religiously. For example, the delphinium grows as tall as the Rudbeckia, but the flowers are tall rather than the plant itself, and I cut them back after flowering in July. So I get a good display in the front, it's dramatic, it's near the border, I can look through it to what else is going on, then cut them back hard, and then all is revealed. Whereas the Rudbeckia take a while to grow, they don't start flowering till July, so they're going to fill this space, not have anything other than foliage to look at, and then be in flower from July through to October. And obviously, if you have structural planting, like this hornbeam, anything behind it that isn't taller is lost. You won't see it. So mix your heights, think them through. Got to think of colour too. The colour of these is a good, strong egg yolk yellow, and yellow works really well as the opposite to purple. It makes purple look more purple, and purple makes yellow look more yellow. Orange is the opposite to blue. So by using opposites, you intensify colour. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly of all, you're thinking about rhythm. I don't plant symmetrically here in the Jewel Garden. We have the same plants roughly in each of the 8 beds, but not in the same place. So you're picking up colour, you're picking up height and movement and even fragrance sometimes, and that gives it a kind of dynamism. That's what makes a border come alive. So having the chance to redo the Jewel Garden like this, I think is wonderful. I'm going to make the most of it and really enjoy it. Now, one of the plants that we definitely use here in the Jewel Garden a lot are dahlias, and we grow quite a lot, but nothing like as many as the grower that we went to visit last summer down near Lyme Regis.
There must be a dahlia for everybody, I would have thought. There are so many different colours, so many different shapes, so many sizes. Whether you want great tall dahlias to put in a vase in your house or you want little bedding dahlias, there really is something for everything. I'm Anna May and I live in Dorset and I grow lots of dahlias. I bought my first dahlia at the Horticultural Society locally, and it was a bright pink one, and I was very taken with it. The next year I had 7 dahlias, and then suddenly I had 300, and then it was, I think, 600 and then 1,000. So as you can see, I was very taken with that first dahlia. the garden was full. So I asked my husband if we couldn't just dig a little patch in one of the fields. And the little patch got bigger and bigger. And so I went from the little corner of the garden to, a few years later, having 7 great long rows of dahlias. A lot of people come and visit. They come to choose their dahlias, whether it's for weddings or parties. And so I do like it to look nice when they're here. And so I've decided that rose in colour order works best. And this year I think we've got the order right. But sometimes you get a real surprise. So this is my pink and white row. And here we've got a Rosemary's Dawn plant. And yet here we have a little quarter of it, maybe less than a quarter, reminding me that actually it should be Rosemary's Blush. It's sort of winking at me and going, you've actually got no control, I will do what I want. Dahlias will grow in most situations, but there's a few things you do probably want to bear in mind. When you first pot up your tuber, you'll give it a bit of water just to get it going, but don't give it too much water. Keep it somewhere that's bright, it needs light to get going. Make sure there are no slugs or snails anywhere in your greenhouse, your polytunnel, near your windowsill, wherever you're growing them. You've just got to keep an eye out, because as soon as those little green shoots appear that you will be so excited about, so will the slugs, and they will be after them. Some of the dahlias do get very, very big. So this one is perfect if you want to put it in a pot or at the front of a border. This little one is Small World. Charming, look at these little tiny flowers, absolutely sweet. And look at all the buds. Listen, you're going to get 50, 60 flowers off this easily in the season. So it's fantastic value. They are just so generous, they're the best. So deadheading's very important to encourage lots of flowers all through the season. And I like to cut the stem quite low, really very low actually. Instinct would say cut here, because this one is on its way, but I'm not going to do that, because then I will get the next stems growing from here, which won't be very long, and I'd like longer ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way down here and cut here, even though it means I've sacrificed this and these two, which seems a shame, but it means I will get much better stems growing in the future instead of one short one from there. It's painful because you know what you're losing, but you've got to do it, it's worth it. So this is sort of my experimental bed. This is where I will plant seeds, complete unknown quantities every year. So they could be seeds that I've saved, or I've been given from other people's dahlias, or I've bought from somewhere. And I planted all of these in April, so they're doing really well. And you get surprises, it's very exciting. So this one, it's that sort of corally peachy colour, which I absolutely love. And it's got this extra double layer of petals. I mean, it's extraordinary. I don't think I've seen anything like this. So as well as growing dahlias in the field and in the experiment beds, I grow them in the borders in the garden. And this is Totally Tangerine, which is a gorgeous anemone. I mean, just look at the shape of that. Isn't that just amazing? Absolutely lovely. And this one, you can see here, there's a little bit too much going on this stem. And rather than having, I think about 7 or 8 slightly weedy looking flowers, I would rather disbud here, take these little buds off, take these little buds off. I think I'm going to take all of that off, in fact. But I might take all of that off. And then you see this stem has now just got 3 buds to focus on. So it will be a better stem and it will have better flowers. These are my thumbnails. Every week I probably disbud 10,000 little tiny buds off the dahlias, and I can't get the colour of the sap out from under my nails. And so I will probably look like this till Christmas. You want to pick the dahlia at just about the right time to get the most out of it, because I think you'll get a good 4 to 5 days in the vase if you look after a dahlia. And so we'll pick it when it's about 2/3 open. So I will either pick first thing in the morning or in the evening, and then I'll leave them in buckets of cold water in a cool, dark place to condition, because then they can get fully hydrated and then you really will get the best out of them. Aren't they just beautiful? And to think that these all come from something that looks like a grubby little potato. I mean, they're just exquisite.
All plants have people that love them dearly, but some plants seem to attract a sort of extra depth of passion and interest, not to say sometimes obsession. And I think dahlias are one of them. Now, I love dahlias, and I've got quite a few. But at this time of year, it's time to get out the ones that you've stored, or if you're buying dahlias, now's the time to do certain things, because it's too early to plant them. The risk of frost is too great. But what you can do, and what we do, is pot them up, and they will grow. And as soon as the last frost has gone, you can plant them out, and you will get flowering dahlias 2, 3, sometimes even 4 weeks earlier than those that are already in the ground. This is one that's called Verone's Obsidian, or also sold as Honker Black. And the reason why they're called that is because they're such a dark burgundy that they look black, with quite thin petals and a bright egg yolk yellow centre. They're really dramatic. And you can see a really good set of tubers. Check them to see that there are no damaged tubers. When you buy them, or if you're in store, make sure there are none rotten, and they should feel plump and firm. I mean, that is really good. I'm very happy with that. Masses of tubers. Now, at this stage, get a pot. Obviously, old pots, recycled. Put a little bit of compost in the bottom. Doesn't need too much. It's not going to be in the pot for terribly long. Place the tubers in it like that. You don't need a great big pot. Just an inch or so around the outside is plenty. And do it so that the top is just a bit below the surface. And then pack compost around it. And don't use old compost. It needs to be fresh, peat-free compost. It doesn't matter if the tubers are near the top, whereas when you're planting them outside, you want them to be deeper than that. Label it. I will put this either in a corner of the greenhouse, or a cold frame is fine. Anywhere that's frost-free and light, and a windowsill obviously would do the job. Let it grow, and then as soon as the frosts are past outside, I'm going to have these flowering good few weeks earlier than those already in the ground. Now, still to come on today's programme. Frances visits a community garden in Bradford specialising in bringing people together.
It is really important that we have things like this where people can come in, spend time learning about gardening, and they can also spend time learning about cooking and about health and nutrition. Some of it is about the companionship and the working together.
Yeah.
And we visit a gardener who has squeezed 35 trees into his back garden.
I do have a bit of an obsession. I've probably got a few too many for a garden this size.
We've had to bring in a one in or a one out policy. He sometimes sneaks trees in without me noticing, or he thinks I don't notice, but I always do.
That'll do. I'm preparing this piece of ground to sow broad beans. Now, broad beans are one of the very few seeds that will germinate when the temperatures are quite low. If you're not sure which vegetables to sow early in the year, or if the ground is wet and cold, broad beans are a good bet. There are many, many different varieties, and if you're sowing earlier, then aquadolce will certainly be a good bet. I've also got a red bean, which is very decorative, and you pick it. But I love the crimson flowered ones. So I'm going to stick with the crimson flowers for the moment, and I'll sow these later for succession. So prepare the ground, getting a nice tilth. I've added quite a lot of compost already. I did that about a month ago, just as a mulch, didn't dig it in. So I use a board for my spacing, just a straight scaffolding plank, and that's a good width for a double row. A double row always works best for me, and in principle, each seed, therefore each plant, wants to be placed about 6 to 9 inches apart. And what I'll do is I'll place them and just push them into the ground. Those in. There's something very meditative about systematically and rhythmically sowing vegetables outside with the soil, where they're going to grow, a robin singing and blackbirds, is incredibly, for me, incredibly healing. It's restorative. It creates a sort of foundation of, I suppose, happiness. Well, you know, joy, simply from sowing broad beans. For the second row, you do need to leave room to get in there and harvest them. So what I do is flip 1, 2, and then 3, and that's going to be a very dirty board if I do that. So I'm going to slide it over like that. So I've got that much space between them. And actually, one way of using that space, which would otherwise be wasted, is you can sow a line of radish down in between them, or maybe plant some lettuce if you've got some little lettuce plants that have been growing on. Because those you can harvest before you need to get in there and walk all over it to pick the beans. So I'll put another row in here. And of course, as part of the rotation of vegetables, the first plant to go in a freshly composted plot are legumes. That includes beans of all kinds and peas. And they fix nitrogen from the air, so they're adding goodness to the soil. And they should be followed by brassicas. And that, of course, includes all types of cabbage and kale and Brussels sprouts. And they really like nitrogen. And then after that, you follow the brassicas with the carrot family. That's parsnip, celery, parsley, carrots, which don't like fresh compost or manure. The crucial thing is try to avoid growing the same thing on the same piece of ground, certainly for more than 2 years, and ideally not in successive years, because you're avoiding a build-up of any kind of disease. Keep moving things on. I've said how important growing vegetables is to me, promoting a sense of well-being. And Frances went to visit a project in Bradford, this year's UK City of Culture, where they are promoting that healing and well-being through the raising and growing of superb vegetables.
Tucked away in a public park near Bradford city centre is Wibsey Community Garden. Established in 2013. In 2017, it was revamped and run as a new charity. A team of volunteers ensures the 2.6-acre site is able to keep up a supply of delicious produce for the local community. And the huge amount of fresh fruit and veg grown here is in constant demand.
First impressions, there are two things that I notice here immediately. Number one, it is absolutely full of growing. There are 3 polytunnels, there's an orchard, soft fruit area, there's an apiary, and there are so many raised beds all crammed with vegetables and salads. But the second thing that I notice is that the atmosphere here is so warm and so welcoming.
Much of the produce grown is sold on site. But today, they are preparing an order from a local grocery store. an extra challenge for Dan Thistlewood, who's in charge of the panoply of fruit and veg grown here.
Hi, Dan.
Morning.
You're picking for the order, are you?
I am. I've got 2 kilos of salad to pick this morning.
Oh, excellent. I mean, I can give you a hand. I haven't got snips, so I'll just do it nice and slowly.
No, you're fine.
And you're in charge of growing all the produce here?
Yes, this year, yeah. Yeah, we've got 3 polytunnels and about 150 beds. So, yeah, we need to keep on a good rotation, but we've got all sorts of different fruits and veggies going on at any given time.
And how do you guarantee there's always something growing?
So my main method is to oversow. At any given time, I've got 5 or 6 beds of salad in the ground. I've got 3 or 4 module trays up there of seedlings on the go. I've got salad in the ground that is just freshly picked. So this is only, I think, the 2nd week we're picking this one.
So how do you pick your varieties? Is it sort of like the highest yield or the most dependable ones?
We are very much a make do amend kind of site. I inherited a fridge full of seeds, so I'm basically going with what's there. I'm not particularly worried about sow dates or best before years. The majority of these seeds were well out of date when we planted them, and they're making some beautiful crops.
And obviously part of your job is growing veg, but a big part of your job is kind of looking after the people who come here as well, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. I mean, we have people from about 3 or 4 years old up to about 83, 84 years old. We've got all different walks of life. We've got all different cultures, all different religions. Got a lot of people that I think otherwise wouldn't even talk to each other on the street. They come in here and we all work as one big happy family, really.
This is a garden that actively welcomes anybody and everybody, which means you never know exactly who you'll find on any given day. Behind one of the polytunnels, volunteers Shaheen, Derek and Carol are preparing beds for the next crop.
How long have you been coming here?
I've been coming here for about 1.5 years.
Right, and you enjoy it presumably?
Oh, I love it here. It's absolutely lovely.
Yeah.
Everybody's so friendly. You know, it's socialising as well, really, because you're making friends when you're here. And you're learning lots of things, because whatever I learn from here, I go home and I do it in the garden, yeah.
Bradford's obviously a really diverse city, but do you think that having everyone in a garden like this in one place helps to build the community a bit?
Definitely.
Definitely do.
Yeah, it does. Meet different people, don't
And I think,
it's
different cultures.
different cultures.
We learn about each other's cultures, like we had a pakora day here.
Yeah, that was amazing.
That was really nice, wasn't it?
And then we made apple crumble.
Apple crumble, yeah, that's 2 together. Shows that you can do it. It can happen.
Yes.
And you can live together in harmony.
I must have been missed out on the apple crumble, you know.
You missed out on the apple crumble? Nobody saved you any?
Nobody told me. Yeah.
Well, I hope you had some of the ginger cake that's floating around today.
I will be. Yeah.
Good, because that's delicious.
One person with no time for the delights of ginger cake is manager Jen White, busy in the kitchen making sure today's order is ready on time.
So tell me about this place. You're clearly producing lots and lots of vegetables.
We do. Tuesday's our hectic morning.
And how many people from the community kind of come and use this space?
We're actually really popular and there's hundreds of people. We've got 40 active volunteers who come every week and contribute the time. We're in the middle of Bradford. It's quite shocking to think that because it's a little oasis. But within Bradford, there is a high level of poverty and people do struggle to find healthy foods for themselves and their families. So it is really important that we have things like this where people can come in, spend time learning about gardening, and they can also spend time learning about cooking and about health and nutrition. Some of it is about the companionship and the working together.
Yeah.
Outside, volunteers Brian, Daz and Rebecca are planning for the longer term, operating a fairly unusual looking piece of equipment used for sieving soil and compost.
As you can see, the thinner stuff is falling through the finer mesh. The bigger stuff that we don't want in with a normal soil going through at the bottom. And that's the difference in the two.
Oh, yes, look at them. That's brilliant. It's quite a contraption, this. It's so much quicker and so much easier than you kind of the classic sieve where you're doing it by hand.
When I came here, that's what they were doing. So found the cycle wheels in one of the sheds down there. We knew we had the mesh. Right. These are some old greenhouse parts.
Oh, yes. And cost what to make?
Zero. A morning, couple of cups of coffee in the morning.
Coffee.
Yeah. I'd say that's a bargain.
A lot of coffee, yeah.
So, when did you first start coming here?
I started just over a year and a bit ago. I had 3 heart attacks. I was in hospital for 11 days, came out, tidied a lot of the things out of my garden shed and various other things, thinking, well, you know, this is, got to be careful now. Looked for somebody to give it to, because I had all sorts of spades, shovels, you name it. Found this place, rang them up. I did literally. A couple of days later, I came up, had a look. I explained to them that I couldn't be walking up and down the sites. I can't dig, I couldn't do anything like that. But certainly helping them out, you know, repairing things, yes, I could do that. Daz is a grafter, you know, he's the type. So between us, I could say, right, I need to do this.
Yeah.
Daz would be there with me.
So this place has changed your life, really, then?
Oh, completely.
It's like another world.
Yeah.
You just escape reality and just come here, and it's just like it's, you know, it is like utopia in here in a lot of ways. It's just nothing out there can bother you. You're just here at peace. Lovely.
Yeah. Just get on with it.
We get so used nowadays to hearing people say that gardening is good for you, it's good for your mental health, it's good for your physical health. But you come to a garden like this and you speak to the people here and they actually use the words, this garden has changed my life. And suddenly it brings home how we shouldn't take that for granted. It's so important. It can really change the way that we are and bring whole communities together. We should never underestimate the power that a garden can have.
I think Frances' point is a really good one, because we know now that there are lots of community projects and they're all doing good work, but for the individuals involved, they're the only project. And their transformative effect is really profound, and that's what's to be celebrated. Now, this is the long walk. This is a long strip between the busyness of the cottage garden and the intensity of the jewel garden. It's a breathing space. But for the last 10 years, we've had box cones with Alchemilla mollis running either side of the path that went all the way down. But then box blight devastated the cones. And last year, we dug them all up, put in drainage, and made what we wanted to be a lawn. And the idea was my grandchildren could come here and run up and down and ride their bikes and kick a ball and generally muck about and play. But you can see part of it hasn't endured well over winter. Compaction, shade, and too much water has really caused problem. So I've got a machine here that will help out. It's an aerator, and you can hire it, and it will take out plugs of soil, spread those plugs on the ground. That will let oxygen in and also loosen the soil. So let's get this machine going. You can see it's pretty dramatic and very effective. It's pulling up lumps of soil. They look like goose droppings. But these little plugs of soil that it's taking out, if you can crumble them between your fingers, all you need to do is brush over the whole thing or use a wire rake, and that will even them out and break them up, and they'll go back down into the holes. If, like these, you squeeze them between your fingers and they just mold, a bit like plasticine, then you need to let them dry out. Leave them on the surface, daylight to day, may even just be a few hours. But now is the best time of year to do this. And if you can't get a machine, this is only the second time in my life I've used one of these machines, just get a fork and work it in. But that is hard work. And you do need to really go as deep as you possibly can. Either way, just remember the 3 tenets of really good grass: sunshine, water, and drainage. And probably drainage is the most important of the lot. Now I can top dress the lawn using a seed mix, but I am going to wait until the overnight temperatures warm up a little bit, and then the seeds will germinate. We're going now across to the other side of the country to join Nick Phillips and his family in their garden near Cambridge. And I know that grass is not very high up on Nick's gardening priorities.
I have to say, having a garden where we can just get outside, enjoy the fresh air, enjoy the wildlife has been really, really vital for us as a family. We're very, very lucky to have this space. My name's Nick. Welcome to our garden in Cambridgeshire. I live here with my wife Hannah and our baby Max, who's 5 months old. We moved here about 3 years ago. The entire area was covered in weed suppressant membrane and about a foot of gravel. I started peeling back some of the membrane, and it was like a bit of an archaeological dig. You could see there was a garden here before. This is the drought-resilient part of our garden, and we've got really, really difficult conditions. We're in Cambridgeshire, which is one of the driest parts of the country, and it gets absolutely baked. But also, to add to the challenge, we're on really heavy, deep clay, and that gets super wet and waterlogged during the winter. And we had to choose plants that were really robust and resilient to all those different conditions. One of my absolute favourites, though, has to be the Olympic mullein, which is behind me, which is such a majestic plant. It starts one year relatively low to the ground, and then the next year it sends up this huge flower spike. It flowers for many months. It's just going over now. But even when it's finished flowering, it's hugely architectural, looks great all through winter, and is a really, really good food plant for lots of different wildlife. So yeah, I really love that plant. So I do have a bit of an obsession, and that is trees, and I absolutely love planting trees. I've probably got a few too many for a garden this size. I've got about 30 or 35 different trees. I've lost count, to be honest. I've got pomegranate, I've got spindle tree, I've got Persian ironwood, a dawn redwood, cherry tree, a persimmon tree, a small tree called Salix magnifica, which has amazing, beautiful leaves. I've got wedding cake tree. Gosh, the list, I've got many more. I don't remember what else I've got now. Oh yeah, I forgot a few at the back, but yeah.
We've had to bring in a one in or a one out policy. He sometimes sneaks trees in without me noticing, or he thinks I don't notice, but I always do.
Probably not my finest moment, but when I sneaked in some extra trees when my wife was on a hen do.
I was coming back from my hen party, and then as I arrived back, I saw Nick sneaking around the corner carrying a large pot which contained the crabapple tree. So yeah, always managing to just squeeze another one in there if at all possible.
Our garden is about 40 metres long by 15 metres wide. From a tree point of view, that might seem not particularly big. So we really had to think about lots of different techniques we can use to try and bring trees into the garden. So this is what's known as a pillar apple tree or column apple tree. And basically what that means is it grows vertically up, doesn't get very big, and all the fruit are just around the main trunk. So this will only grow maximum about another metre, and this is as wide as it's going to get. You don't get as many apples on them, obviously, but you can grow a wide variety of different types in a very, very small area. One of my methods to get more trees into the garden is to buy dwarf cultivars. So these are trees which don't get very big at their adult height, and we've got two here. We've got ginkgo, and we've also got a Katsura tree called Global. And both of these, the normal species, could get bigger than 30 metres, huge, far too big for this garden. But these will barely get bigger than they are now. So you can have them in your borders, you can have them on your patio, you can incorporate them anywhere. The thing I love about the ginkgo, firstly, it's called Troll, which I think is a really, really cool name. But also, when Max is a bit older, I want to be able to tell him about how this tree was around in the dinosaurs' time. If you're planning to get a dwarf cultivar tree like these, because they're smaller, they often have smaller roots, which means you do need to really keep on top of things like watering, and they love nothing better than a good annual mulch every spring, which helps really keep the moisture in and gives them some nutrients as well. This is another technique you can use to get more trees into your garden. So these are Himalayan birch, and I absolutely love these trees. They have the most amazing trunks. And what I've done here is I've planted 3 trees really close together. And that does mean that they will actually compete with each other, which might sound a bit strange, but the great thing about that is it restricts the height of all 3. So you can have a fantastic tree species in a small space, and it also looks like a multi-stem tree, which are quite expensive. So it's not only cheap, but it's also a great way to get more trees into your garden. Just behind me here is an example of a really good, impactful tree for a small space. It's probably my favourite tree in the world, certainly my favourite tree in the garden. It's called a paperbark maple, and this one's only a youngster, so it's only about 2.5 years old. Paperbark maples have so many seasons of interest. So you've got fantastic autumn colour. When the leaves come out in the spring, they're really, really vibrant. And it has this, one of the best things about it is this peeling bark, which is this really unique feature. And it just looks stunning, even in the winter. What we're really hoping is the garden will evolve over time, and one of the things which is so important is shade and something to keep you cool, and trees are just brilliant for that because they not only provide shade but they actually cool the air around you by evaporating water off their leaves. So it's one of the best things you can include in your garden if you really want to create somewhere that you can enjoy all year round.
Nick's done an amazing job on the garden. It's just been really wonderful to see how the garden has changed and just see it come to life, really, in such a short space of time.
I'm really hoping that we leave a bit of a legacy in this garden. I mean, trees are a bit like keepers of time. You know, they'll be seeing things, you know, in over centuries. And so I'm just really excited by the huge number of trees we've got in this garden, and we'll leave effectively a little mini forest garden. I'm super passionate about including trees in the garden, and I would encourage everybody to do so.
I think Nick is completely correct in saying that every garden can have at least one tree. The only thing I would say is just find out the mature size of the tree that you're planting. And if, when it's mature, which might be in 100 years' time, it's too big for the garden, then think twice. So, for example, this is a wild cherry, a gin. And if I had my time again, I would never plant this because they cast a big shade, they suck up all the moisture, they drop branches. But there are lots of smaller trees that are wonderful, acers and crab apples and hawthorns and so many, and of course you can prune and shape. So don't be put off planting trees, just bear in mind that some of them grow very big indeed. Now, here are your jobs for the weekend. If you're growing tomatoes this year and you sowed the seed earlier, they should now be ready to prick out. When they have a true leaf, it's time to give each seedling its own individual growing unit. Hold it by a leaf, never by the stem, because if the leaf breaks, at least that can be replaced. Take as much root per plant as you possibly can, and then carefully put them into an individual pot or plug. And then water them, put them somewhere warm and sunny, so they can grow on in the coming weeks into nice, sturdy young plants. hydrangea paniculatas, like limelight, produce their flowers on new growth. This means they can be pruned as hard as you like at this time of year, and they will still flower. I prune back to a framework, removing any damaged, old, or crossing branches while I'm about it. And this will provoke the new shoots that will carry their flowers in the summer. Lace caps and mop heads produce their flowers on previous year's growth, so shouldn't be pruned so hard. And if you're not sure which is which, best not to prune at all. If, like me, you've been storing your pelargoniums over winter to protect them, now is the time to take them out, look them over, and cut them back. And don't be frightened to do this hard, because that will produce lots of new shoots that will carry a really good display. If they already have fresh shoots, these can be kept for cuttings. Pop them in a jar of water, and very often they'll root in that and then can be potted on, or can be potted on into a very free-draining compost, and then they can root. In a way, what I'm doing now is an extension of the revamp of the jaw garden, because having cleared the grass borders and cut them back, it's a little bit early to be adding any new grasses or dividing any that we've got. And I've taken out quite a lot of Iris sibirica from the jaw garden. Now, Iris sibirica has got grass-like foliage and wonderful sapphire blue flowers. And Iris sibirica loves this garden because it likes fundamentally damp conditions, whereas the bearded irises we really struggle with. But they only flower for 10 days, 2 weeks in May and very early June, and then that's it, and you have a lot of foliage. And the foliage looks great in here, but not so good in the jaw garden. They need to be fairly near the front because the grasses grow very big and they'll crowd them out otherwise. Now, look at this. Look at that. That, for the uninitiated, is bindweed. This is one of the worst weeds you can have in the garden because every tiny little bit of root, and it's very brittle, you can just snap it easily in your fingers, makes a new plant. And it gets in amongst the roots of other plants and can become like a great mass of spaghetti. What we tend to do is put these on the bonfire and burn them. But we have got bindweed in here, so now also if I come across it, a really good time to dig it out there. Well, that's it. All we've got time for today. But before we go, just to remind you that on Sunday, 1 o'clock in the morning, the clocks go forward, so we get another hour of glorious evening sunshine in which to garden. And I will see you back here at Longmeadow next Friday at 8 o'clock. So until then, bye-bye.